Here we are with another Bigwater Podcast, doing this one in person, which I'm not sure if these guys are upset about or not, but nevertheless, we got Travis Hartman. You guys have seen him on the podcast before. Bob Needles, you've seen him in some videos and maybe even a podcast or two. Last year, matter of fact, Bob, 53 weeks ago, we did a Campfire Confessions. Do you remember that?
How could I forget?
Do you feel good about it? Did you like it? Or are you...
Oh, it was wonderful.
Anyhow, I can see this starting off well. So we're going to call this Campfire Confessions Part 2. But Travis, I believe you had a better name.
Yeah, Campfire Accusations.
Campfire Accusations. That's what this is going to be. We have a few DNA tests. We have a couple paternity tests. And this is going to get real Jerry Springer real fast. But in all seriousness, we were out fishing today, right, boys? And it was nasty. Honestly, sitting in there in the dark, it was like 5:45 or something this morning, sitting at the boat ramp, and I was like, I don't know if we're going to be able to make this work. I couldn't see anything, hearing the waves crash. And the wave forecast, again, you guys watching this, listen to this, know that the forecasts aren't worth anything. It's just kind of a number out there that's usually way more or way less. And, whether it's way more or way less, it tends to screw up your fishing trip. And I thought we had that. How about you guys?
Yeah, it's one of those days we wouldn't have looked at the forecast in the morning and chosen to go.
I mean, you would make the big drive. Like, we came up here, we're going to be fishing several days in a row, and we wanted to do a little day in the lake thing with these guys. But I really, what did you honestly think? Would you have went in your boat? Or would you have waited, or what would you have done?
Well, with that storm was, on its way. I think our window was so short that I probably would have said, it's not worth, going for that.
Bob's things were done. I totally understand. Well, our window we thought was maybe as far as noon, is according to the weather people. Again, you look at a different forecast, a different service, app or whatever, you can almost get whatever number you want, right? It's just that's kind of how that works. But regardless, we got out. We only fished a couple hours. Fortunately, we had a fire bite, and maybe you'll see this before the video. Maybe you watch the video before the podcast. But nevertheless, we're going to kind of walk through, even if they didn't see this, and talking about kind of what happened here, maybe what we could have done better, or what happened. A lot of these people are asking questions like, it's not like we're like even one of our local buddies when I put up on the Facebook thing, said, we're going on a little road trip, and the guy was like, I thought you meant like South Dakota. Which is fair, but at the same point, where we primarily fish, all of us primarily fish, I would say, in the eastern end of the western basin or the western end of the central basin, right? So let's say islands or a little east of there. We might as well be in Kentucky or Alaska when you're down here.
It's a different lake.
It's a different lake. It's literally like Erie is like 3 different lakes. We're doing totally different stuff, which we'll get into. But it's a different deal, right? I mean, it's just if you fish our tactics that we typically would do, even this time of year back home, literally 2-hour drive that way, you're probably going to end up pretty poorly. It's not going to be, not that you wouldn't catch fish or something, but it's not going to be well. Fair?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a whole different program. It's, the whole forage base, how it affects the fishing down here is totally different than what it is.
So the one thing that you probably even need to remember, remind you guys, is a lot of people that listen to this, they don't live in Ohio. Mm-hmm. So they don't even understand some of these things. And the question is like, well, why would you go rent a house and you guys come down? Because, it costs a lot to come down here. It's more time. But I like doing something different. I like catching big fish. We're trying to provide these people with a little bit different type of content. I've been coming down here for close to 30 years, 20-some anyhow, and it's just something different. It's a little swing of pace. But Travis, obviously, he's a fisheries biologist. If you haven't watched some of those things, he's actually like the supervisor of Bigwater now. But we're tapping into his old days when he was manageable and didn't have a huge ego. But yeah, see, he knows. But give us a little of biology end of because the first question we asked people, hey, on social media, like, what do you want? Why are you coming down here? So explain what's really going on.
A lot of it's the beauty of Lake Erie in that it's almost 3 lakes in one. You kind of referenced that already. But it has everything walleye need, and what they want and need each season changes. So there's a lot of habitat around the islands. There's a lot of food around the islands, but it doesn't have the deeper, colder water that they're looking for. So they come down here, and at the same time, if you're a big fish fisherman, if you want to have the best chance of catching big fish, catching numbers of quality fish, You have to go where they are. And right now, they're here in the central basin, and some are even farther in the east basin. But it's the beauty of Lake Erie. And as you move east, the game changes. How deep they are, what they're eating, how you're going to target those fish and give yourself the best chance to catch them.
So I think we talked about this on a podcast, but briefly. I remember hearing that 90% of the sport fishing, so mainly guides and recreational people, happens in the western end of the lake. But once we get past, let's say, I mean, this is a rough floating date, but let's say when a lot of people even start fishing, maybe in May, 90% of those fish are gone. So essentially 90% of the fishermen are fishing for 10% of the fish. Today we did not see a boat. Now that was partially weather induced, but Bob came down here last year. We've been doing this, like this isn't our first rodeo down here. You don't see a lot of boats. It's not set up like the islands. It's not as touristy, what have you. And you gotta be kind of into it. Like you just can't randomly throw something over the side of the boat down here, right?
Well, it's the perfect case of you have to know and trust your sonar, because you're not necessarily going to a piece of structure or something that you can see other than looking at your sonar and finding fish. Down here, if you don't find fish on your sonar or at least find the bait that they're eating, there's a lot of water and you're wasting a lot of time. And we kind of saw that this morning running out, right?
And we're going to get into some of the details because that was a lot of the questions of people. But again, like a couple of years ago, we came down here, me and a camera person, literally one day. Come down, it was rough as a cob, left over from kind of like what we had today type of deal. And I mean, there was huge waves. Not one person in the parking lot. We didn't launch till 9 in the morning because of the waves trying to let them die down a little bit. I went 17 miles before I saw one single thing. I mean, blank screen. And then when you hit it, it was just like, again, the big fish. It was, primarily smelt based, and the walleyes were there. And they weren't in a, off the bottom, because everything was so bottom oriented after that blow, mixing things up, which is kind of what we want to get into with you a little bit. But if you're not marking them, it's not like being in the western end, or if you guys are fishing reservoirs and you're in 10 foot of water pitching jigs. I don't rely on my sonar there. Yes, I'm sure the forward facing sonar people and the side imaging, yeah, that stuff comes into play. But 2D sonar, in my opinion, when you're in clean water like we have, generally speaking, on Lake Erie, if you're in less than 30 feet of water, it often isn't going to tell you the entire picture, especially when you're just idling the boat over. Like those fish, we've seen it on like Mega Live, the forward facing stuff. They just get out from underneath the boat. Like you can be catching them like mad, you don't mark anything, and then we go home, we're picking our gear up, and I start driving, and people are like, oh my God, look how many fish right here. Like we had them too, they just, they didn't want to play with the cars in the street, right? So, but down here, when you get this deep, we were in 70 plus feet of water today. I feel like they don't skedaddle as much.
Yeah, I think there's even a pressure component to that, where there aren't 50 boats in a football field area or 2 football field area. So it's both. There's more water, there's more safety, security, and fewer boats, fewer pressure, fewer things to be afraid of, quite frankly.
And we've talked about this on a million podcasts, but the pressure thing, when these people driving over the top of their fish, it just blows my mind. It pisses me off because it screws everybody. And then again, you even see it when you're fishing deep water down here, honestly. And it's crazy now that we have things that we were guessing, or we kind of had, a lot of, correlation. We think, I think this is kind of what's happening, because when we do this, we don't catch them as good. Now with the forward-facing sonar, like Mega Live on my boat, I can watch these fish skedaddle and just literally watch them leave as boats drive by or what have you, and even lures hitting the water in shallow water, they get spooked by that. So, but anyway, so why are these fish coming? Let's give them the biology, even though I know we've probably talked about this at some point. Sure. But smelt, we had a rainbow smelt spit up today. Regular smelt.
Well, they're all rainbow smelt down here. So
what else we got?
So they're primarily eating rainbow smelt. That's the most abundant forage fish down here. They're coming down here for cool water, and with that, the combination of cool water and enough bait. So you will find gizzard shad. We actually had a large hatch of alewife last year that looked like gizzard shad, but are a different species. So there's a little variety down here, but at the end of the day, when we see really good growth, when we see full stomachs, it's when there's enough alewives to provide that. Or, rainbow smelt to provide that. I just tripped myself up. But, the rainbow smelt are the prime prey. They, as we saw today, are about this big right now, the ones that they're
the size of a deep junior thunder stick.
They are. We found that out firsthand. And, it's a best case scenario. Cool water, deep water, abundant prey, and it's what they come down here to spend the summer doing.
So I know walleyes don't prefer that warmer water, but really it comes down to the food pyramid, where it's like guys go to the bars because that's where the chicks are going, right? I mean, you can drink in your back patio. It's the same thing with these walleyes. They're going where these smelled are. So give me a little breakdown on, not all of these fish come down here, obviously, and there's just like people that don't leave their house. But also, I remember something, you clarify this for me, like these fish that are sexually mature, I think was the term you used, like they're a first year fish probably isn't a 12-inch walleye going to go from Toledo to down here. So,
right. What we've seen with the younger fish, and these are the fish that are becoming mature, maybe haven't spawned yet or have spawned for the first time, they don't have that physiological demand to find that cold water to eat what an 8-pound fish needs to eat. So they can make a living in the Western Basin, and they might use the east edge of the Western Basin. They might get out of the shallowest, warmest water around Toledo and head to Kelly's Island or a little farther east. But it's a lot more refined movement when they're young, when they're becoming mature. Once they're over 4 or 5 years old, they're into a routine of spawning every year. They're getting bigger. They have to eat more to maintain their size. Then they need that cold water. They need the cold water. They need the big schools of smelt, and it's why they come down here. And each year can be a little different in the timing, but the result's the same. They come down here and they spend the summer.
So do we have, because normally I actually this time of year I put an electric downrigger. Not most of the time I never even put a rod on it, but I'm using it just to quickly get my fish hawk not only up and down, but to move it in the column, because then I can get readings, through. But some things that you guys can do, again, because I don't think, do we technically, like right now, have a thermocline?
Absolutely. So the thermocline is that drastic change in temperature. It's what creates 2 separate masses of water. So you have a ethylene above the thermocline. That's the warmer water. That's the water that's circulating and coming in contact with air and staying oxygenated. And then you have the hypolimnion below the thermocline that stays cold. And it functionally, it doesn't warm up. It's in the 50s. And it becomes cut off. It's a separate mass of water. It's not obtaining oxygen from the air, and you functionally end up with 2 separate masses of water. You can almost think of it like 2 Ziploc bags full of water sitting on each other, and they kind of can move around independently, and they're separate masses of water, but they're sitting on each other.
And you'll see that too, you guys, if you crank your sensitivity up a little bit, you'll see kind of a fuzzy line, and there's often 2 of them. Mm-hmm. And if you put a fish hawk through there, which is a speed and temp probe, and you can see that little break, and that's why sometimes like that upper one is just a more minute change, and it's the deeper one generally seems to be, so I know we didn't even look at it today, we didn't have time, so you guys might want to check that video out that we did, but lots of fish catching in a short amount of time. If we were to go out with that fish hawk today, or we had time to do that, what do you think that temperature difference would have been?
So we're in the 70s in the upper mass of water. It's
almost 80 on our surface.
Yeah, maybe it's 78 the surface. On the hottest summers, it almost stays 78 all the way down to the thermocline. I don't think this summer has been that summer yet, but I would say in the 70s. I'd be surprised if it was even upper 60s.
So are we talking about this temperature break that is the thermocline? 2 to 3 degrees, 4 degrees.
Well, the water below it is in the 50s, and it's a very distinct density change and temperature change. So you have warmer, less dense water on the top, cooler, more dense water below, and you're going from the 70s to the 50s in a matter of like 4 feet.
And typically, again, it's like if you do anything long enough, you see where you can discredit almost everything, right? But majority of the fish are going to be caught at or just above the thermocline, because that's where the bait's at. Like I think we got a couple screenshots today where it's just like, it's like a fence, man. It's like the home run fence, and they're all hanging out right on the line there.
Yeah, and that's where you have to know and trust your electronics, because if that thermocline's set up strong and there's no oxygen below it, you don't even need that temperature probe. The temperature probe's great. It'll help confirm what you're seeing on the sonar. But when there's not one mark below that transition you're seeing, there's no oxygen, and that's why the fish aren't down there, which is very different than early in the summer when it sets up and you have that temperature difference, but there's oxygen below because it hasn't been used up yet.
Now, are there other species that will go down? Because I mean, I often do see, even when there is a break, you'll see stuff below. Now, who knows what it is, or again, a sonar mark is just a return, so it could be a trash bag for all we know floating, and obviously not, probably. But is there other species, though, is my point, that, because there's whitefish in Lake Erie too, right? Like,
So what we're finding there's evidence that some fish make very short foraging forays into that low oxygen water. So if there are chironomid midgelarvae, something that can survive low oxygen, that's maybe down in the sediment and starting to emerge, but it is in that low oxygen water, perch, and I can't really speak to whitefish, but we know yellow perch especially will occasionally make short forays into that low oxygen water to feed and then get back out. Now that's when there's no quote unquote no oxygen, when it's really low. We're kind of in a case right now where it's 3 to 6 milligrams per liter, which is low, but still you can maintain respiration with that. So it's a comfort thing. Is there enough oxygen to stay down there, be in the colder water, or is it uncomfortable and we just go down there and eat and then we come back out?
So throwing you under the bus, a couple days before we left, you sent me a screenshot or a link or something, or both, of what you called hypoxia. However you, close enough. But the long and the short of it is, folks, is it was like a death warrant is what he sent, because it was dead on where we're at and dead on kind of where we would typically fish or have been fishing this time of year. And so explain this hypoxia, and obviously it's not like amazing. This is not a great thing. So I was I was a little nerved up when you did that, even though this time of year coming down here, it's I would say it's if you know what you're doing, I would say it's as automatic as it can get, because of the lack of traffic and so many more fish.
So there's always been hypoxia as part of the geography of the lake, the bathymetry of the lake, because of the water depth and because of those two masses getting cut off from each other. That there's been hypoxia here every summer for hundreds of years. Human use, our nutrients, our inputs to the lake probably have increased it. It's probably larger and more dynamic now than it used to be. But there's some great NOAA modeling that predicts exactly what the oxygen is across the whole central basin, and they display it in a map mode where you see that hypoxia moving around and where it is, and there's a cross section. It kind of lets you look at the water column and see exactly what's going on with oxygen throughout the water column. And if you don't look at it, you're throwing away an extremely important piece of information that kind of dictates what you might be doing for where you're going.
So if these people go look at this NOAA modeling, because again, this is an app just like a wind finder or something like that.
It's if you search in Google for Lake Erie hypoxia model, you'll find this page, NOAA page.
And what are the numbers? Like, I know the blue section, but what exactly are the parts per whatever, how that?
So if you look at the really dark blue, that's under 2 milligrams per liter. That's what we consider to be uninhabitable for fish for any amount of time, extended amount of time. And then you start getting into the more yellow and red colors. Red's the top end of the scale, like 12 milligrams per liter. That's excessively high. So it's in the middle there is where it's situationally dependent. So if you're in that 2 to 6 milligrams per liter, you're probably going to find fish. If conditions are right, you're going to catch them there. But once you get down below 2 into that blue, that's where there aren't fish here. There's no oxygen.
Okay, so let's go back in time for each of you guys. Give me a little take. We're not going to talk yet about what we did today, but you've been coming down here fishing for a long time. How was, again, like people listen to this, maybe people that weren't fishing 10 years ago or whatever or more, like now they don't even know what this stuff is because they know forward-facing sonar, or that's in every video on the planet or whatever. So we were trolling today, that's a full disclosure, but boards and all that good stuff. But when you were coming down here, let's say 15 years ago or 20, whatever, what was a typical kind of setup for you?
So for me, I was trying to get baits down to where I knew fish were feeding. So it was looking for bait primarily. When you're running, I don't care how poorly maybe your sonar or transducer are set up, but I'm trying to find bait. Where are the smelt? Where are the big schools of bait fish? And then I want to find the edge of it. I don't want to fish right in it. So, okay, I'm looking at my sonar, I find the bait. I see that, 40 or 50 feet's the top of the smelt piles. and I've got to do something to put bait down there. So it's snap weights, it's lead core, it's divers, it's however you can get baits deep, which is very different than what we normally do over west.
I think it's fair to say if you were to talk to somebody in the parking lot that maybe just came here for the first time, they're from Indiana or whatever, and if they weren't successful, it was because they weren't able to fish deep, or they weren't able to fish efficiently deep, or consistently keep their stuff deep.
Yeah.
Bob, when you've been coming, I mean, Bob's not a spring chicken. Bob is experienced. So when you've been coming down here for a long time, right? When you first started doing that, just give me the quick terms of, kind of how you started with that. Not what we're doing now.
Well, our first trips down here, we didn't really have to venture out as far as we do now. I think that we were in probably 55 to 65 feet of water. My first trips down here, a lot of it was pulling crawler harnesses, just weighting them differently, for the conditions down here. I eventually started transitioning to, crankbaits, the wire stuff. There was a guy who was from Prairie du Chien that would fish the Mississippi River. He was a Mississippi River guide, but he would spend his summers out here.
Hutch?
Yes.
Oh, Hutch, he's crazy.
Oh, absolutely.
He's a hot disaster. I love it.
Yippee skippy.
He is. He is my type of nut job.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, through the club back home, he had spoke, and I talked to him several times, and came out, and he did some crazy things with it was like running deep juniors. You put them back 75, put 2 ounces on, run them another 50, put 2 more ounces on, just crazy stuff that, but he was also running dipsies, and, so that kind of just started expanding, on the crawler harness. But I mean, originally we were coming down here and getting big fish on crawler harnesses, but we were, and I still have those waypoints from, 15 years ago, but we didn't have to run all of that stuff to go that far. One of the things we always, most of this stuff was just to the northeast of Ashtabula. The one thing that was a big issue over there is that there was a lot of nets in that area, and it just had to be.
Were those perch nets then, probably?
Yeah.
Yeah. You ever got tied up in a perch net, Bob? Be honest, Bob.
Yeah,
just me and you talking.
Not had that happen at all.
I feel like I've determined that's a lie.
Nope, I've never done that. But,
Okay.
So I guess the one thing I can see is different is that we're running a lot further. I mean, those early years we'd go out there just to see what the heck's out, at the Canadian line, close to the Pennsylvania line. One thing that's really big out there is there's a lot of traffic, big boat traffic.
Well, and let's back up for a hot second there, where one of my notes that I kind of had was like, we were driving today, it was rough. I knew we had a timeline. It's almost like it's like a guide trip, because you're like, we got so long before we lose the kids, you know what I mean? And we just were going, and I wasn't beating us up. I was driving fairly slow, because it was still pretty bouncy this morning, even when we started. I didn't mark jack. I mean, nothing. And like my 2D sonar, like I'm kind of known for that. I got that dialed in with high-speed marking. When we went from, I mean, literally we were at 69 point something, and when I hit 70 feet of water, it was like it just lit up. And so, give me a little, maybe biology. I know you can't give me 100% on that, but was that maybe because of that oxygen or that temperature?
Yeah.
I mean, it was like on and off.
What we saw before we came out here was that there's a nearshore fringe of hypoxia that's starting to set up that's very low oxygen. And that's different than I used to imagine in my mind. You kind of think about it being like a mass of low oxygen in the middle of the lake and maybe growing out towards the shorelines. That's not what happens. A lot of times it sets up first here on our Ohio shoreline, 40 to 60 feet of water, or wherever it might be based on current conditions. But we had to get past that. We had to go out past that nearshore hypoxia
In case you guys didn't, if you're watching this on YouTube, you got to see Bob rubbing my leg, and we're here. The reason we're inside, this was supposed to be Campfire Confessions, but we're inside because it's absolutely brutal outside in the wind. We just lost power, generator kicked back on, we had lost lights and this and that. I did feel Bob rub my leg. I mean, we can't prove it, but when I watch the video, I'll let you guys know. But back to, hitting that 70 feet of water, it was like, and we had a northeast wind, and so my thought was I just wanted to go, we knew we had one pass, and so we kept going, and I want to say it got better, but it didn't get worse. Like, I mean, even I know he always hawks on the screen, he can't be left out, he's like a 3-year-old like that, you know what I'm saying, Bob? He was checking my work is what he was doing, that's fine. But it just kept, I mean, it was steady, there was miles of those assumed to be rainbow smelt, generally speaking, near the bottom, within probably 10 feet or something like that. So I don't know if you guys know this or not, but working with Fish USA, get some kind of inside stuff, and one of the reps there with the wire line, there's only a couple companies that make this wire line realistically, and talking with these guys, they sell an overwhelming amount of that, literally in the section that we're at, which is basically the Ohio-Pennsylvania line to roughly Cleveland. You go to Pennsylvania, they run lead core, like 99% of the guys. That's crazy because all of the big boats here, guys with these 12, 14-foot beams, they're running these big boards and spreading out because, again, even today, we had an issue because we were limited with efficiency. When you have 300 feet of lino, 250 feet of lino, whatever it is, you just, right, Bob? You can only do so much before you're going to have a problem. You can't push it.
Well, especially lead core, and if you have to bring one over another, and there's a lot of things that you have to consider. And
Travis got a demerit today. I mean, do you want to talk about that?
Let's say that he just new to the program that we were running. So, I think
these guys are they're trying not to eat themselves because they don't want. You walking the line. You are such a candy ass.
Hey, is there truth to this?
If you guys are watching this on YouTube, there's always little perks of watching this on YouTube, like seeing Bob's shaved legs. Pat Johnson, my boy there for last year, brought this up. You guys are getting to see him front direct. He's got the leisure suit. Show him, Bob. Show the people on YouTube these slippers you got. He's got his pimp shoes on. Oh yeah, baby. Oh man, those things do not go out of style. I guarantee you bought those at least 40 years ago. But anyway, back to what you guys care about. But I would watch this on YouTube. That's just me. Wire line deal. Have you done a lot with it?
The only place that I've done wire has been out here, and then it's kind of, we've used it sporadically over the years, just because, there's some years that, the dipsy stuff is going so crazy that, if you're running 3 dipsies aside, so with those 6 rods in the water, you can't keep up with that stuff. I mean, you saw what we had to deal with today, that, because these schools of fish out here will go for miles and miles and miles and miles. So once you get set up, and it's, you very rarely have to turn around and go back. But, one year it was weighted crankbaits, and, so if you can't keep that stuff in the water, I kind of leave wire to the end because it's a lot of work. You've got a 50-foot leader, you've got 300 feet of wire, that stuff, if you mess that stuff up, you're going to have a real mess.
So we're going to break this down for people. This is not 7-strand. People down here use 12-pound, generally speaking, 12-pound single-strand wire. When you backlash that one time, it is game over, and it goes to the core of the spool. I don't know how it does it, but it goes right down in there, and you are like using a Dremel or something to cut through this stuff. I mean, it's done. It's not only game over. You have a winter project or something.
Well,
right?
Even if it's, the other issue is that if it happens and you've got, 150 feet of wire out, now you're to the point where you can't hardly reel, and
I would love to watch you hand over hand a sheephead with like 150 feet of wire, or better yet, 300 out there. Does that say something about me poorly? Par for the course.
Maybe that'd be a time just to the wire broke.
Oops. But people use it because, again, I don't know how much you've used this or feelings on it, but the harmonic hum. there are guys that salmon fish and they, use 7-strand wire on their dipsies because they're like, hey, I get way more bites and they get a little deeper. It does something different to that. Like sharks and different animals, fish relate different to these things. Have you heard the same thing? You got any biology on us?
I guess my only suggestion is that with lead core and waves, there's a clear vertical swim, as the lead core kind of dampens that action but moves the lure up and down. My assumption is with wireline you don't get that, but you're still getting a diving bait to a much deeper depth very effectively. So I think it's, whether it's sound, which is maybe part of it,
Just keep talking.
but I think there's a big lure action component to it, and the conditions might dictate which is more effective.
I think that, what it is it's unlike, and again, we're going to go against kind of what some of those Bob used to do back in the day, because that's what the options were, kind of, especially for small boat guys. When you're in the power, we have evil devil here going on, and I'm getting seizures. When you have the weight distributed amongst the entire 200 or 300 feet, which in theory you do with the wire, and not in theory, but totally what you have with the lead core, it just, like you said, it snakes, it doesn't as herky-jerky, because you find these windows, like we were catching them on 5 and 7 colors today. I almost didn't put the 5 out. It was kind of history, because the fish generally weren't quite that high. And then Travis gets one, and honestly I was only going to put 2 out and then bring them in and swap them. And Travis had one, or you guys, whatever you guys are monkeying on over there. We didn't get the board out. It was boom immediately. It's like, well, I guess there are some fish, above those, which again, you don't want to fish below them. These fish, we'll watch them come up and down.
Right, because I was putting the board on it and immediately noticed that there was a fish on it.
See, he says that because if you guys didn't watch our last year deal with Bob, he got goat roped by me. I mean, I smoked him because he's like trying to reel in, put a board on. I was like, Bob, we have a fish on. Did you watch that? He's like, I don't watch this stuff. You should. I saw you today. But at any rate,
I'm still trying to figure out what goat roped is.
Oh, it's don't Google it, people. Don't let your kids into that. It was just not good. Yeah, it's urban dictionary.
These are all things that I do just to make him, show me all these neat little things that I'm missing.
Well, and that's honestly, and this is not a ball busting. This is talking about the evolution. Like you said, you came out with their crawler harnesses. My buddy Bighead, has won an awful lot of money out right in this neck of the woods using inline weights and different things like that. But again, it really comes down to, if you're going out there with just you and a buddy and you can only run, let's say, 4 or 6 lines or something like that, it's a different deal than if you're trying to catch 42 walleyes on a charter boat full of people and you've got a 14-foot beam and you can run big boards. With what our boats do, we're not going to troll into the waves, the direction and stuff. So it's a situational thing as far as how you're set up, or if a lot of people aren't going to manage all of that line, and so a different system would work. But I would still argue that even then, like there was just, the tournament was just one like 3 days ago or something, I guess now, and it was primarily won on, allegedly, on lead core, and I know the guy, lead core with spinners. And that kind of, I didn't want to jump in so quick to what happened today, but I would say today we ran, we'll go surface on it real quick. We ran Deep Junior Thunder Sticks, smoke show, on the lead core, and then we eventually got divers out. We only had 2 out for majority of the time. But we ended up getting 3 divers out, and the divers with the double willow, we caught some on a single willow too, but those double willows caught the better fish.
Yeah.
Not saying that's across the board or next month or next even tomorrow.
I mean, that might have been more of a where they were in the water column as opposed to where the other baits were. So, but I mean, for the most part, could have been that profile of that bait, of how it attracted the bigger fish. But it did definitely get the bigger fish today.
And truthfully, I know people are probably roll their eyes with this, and it's going to get into some of our questions too. So we're not going to get too deep, but I honestly don't want to catch the giant. I mean, I always like catching big fish, but I have that like sportsmanship, like end of things where I'm like, these fish are dead. Like I normally would release these fish. I'm not a tree hugger with this stuff, but I think at some point you have to be a responsible sportsman, and like I don't want to eat 9-pounders. You know what I mean? But you saw how they aren't going to last. So we'll get into that a little more in a little bit. But I think that the one of the big things is lure size. Because, so we've been doing this program, so you guys want to watch what we were doing, basically a shallower version when we were in the west end of the Central Basin, the video we did with Capt and Chris. We were basically doing what we did today, we just took the shorter leads, less lead core and all that. And I know you guys know this story, but we're going to fill everybody else in. We had a really good day, and I was basically bringing rods in as we're winding down, we're like counting down to the limit. And so less rods in the water, because again, didn't want to tow fish around or kill a fish, because you hook them at that point, they're pretty much dead when that surface temp was almost 80 then. And I put we had a deep junior thunder stick on a dipsy diver, and it was absolutely like automatic. So again, trying to catch less fish. I know this sounds crazy, maybe if you live on Lake Winnebago. Another shot at you guys. One of my buddies always like, he lives on Lake Winnebago, and he says, another shot. But we put a full-size thunder stick on. Okay, we're not talking that much difference. It's not a musky lure. We are going from here to here, right? We caught like one fish. And we're talking, we were in some smoke show situations. So the very next trip out when we filmed this video with Chris, you know, I didn't think of anything. You know, he's setting his side, I'm setting mine. We never caught a fish on that one rod. I'm like, hey, bring that up, make sure we're not towing something. It had that full-size thunder stick on. We took it off. You guys can watch the video on this. And we rattled off like 6 fish in minutes. Just having that smaller size. Have you guys noticed thing with size? Even though we're catching bigger fish, they saw the smelt thing, or they will if you watch today's video. It was exactly the same size as a deep junior thunder stick. What's your take on that?
I have to wonder if there's not some dynamic with a dipsy diver and a deeper diving, bigger build, longer bait. My personal guess would be it wasn't exclusively lure size, lure profile. I think it was more some dynamic with, even though it is a deep diver, that smaller junior and maybe not pulling as hard, maybe not blowing out.
Well, no. I'm talking shallow junior thunder stick to full-size shallow thunder stick.
Okay, shallow thunder stick.
Yeah, no, same shallow diver, because again, I'm sure somebody's going to tell me that, I do this to catch tons of fish. Generally speaking, I'm just telling you, the dipsy diver is the diving device. You know, the harnesses, flutter spoons, or the crankbaits. Shallow divers, you don't need a diver. The dipsy diver is the diver, but no, shallow. Something
wasn't fitting their search pattern. You know.
But I mean, I've seen that. That's why I wondered, you know, some of your experience. I've seen that so many times, especially like when I'm guiding and I'm fishing 20 days in a row doing essentially the same thing, going to the same pod, kind of. It's almost like I know what's going to happen. And some days the bite's a little better on that, but it's crazy on how they just want those smaller baits. I mean, all of the guys down here, 99% of them are using those exact same size, and you wonder if it's not because of the forward size, but maybe we're imparting something else into that.
Well, I mean, it's obvious what they're eating, and they're very similar to those junior thunder sticks, so it's a good starting point, right? And then play with it.
How fast will those bait fish grow? I mean, where will they be in 2 weeks? Will they be significantly bigger, marginally bigger?
I think within a few week period, you're not going to have a noticeable change to a different bait growth. I mean, it's summer. They're you know, they're in their growth period too, but as far as growing into a different bait completely, probably not in a week or two.
I mean, like probably 3-4 years ago, it was weighted bandits, and they were like.
That's right where I was going to go with you.
You know, we just ran 3 aside. That's all you could ever keep up with. You know, and it was just crazy. You know, it was like nonstop action, and it was.
Do you remember me roasting you for using snap weights that heavy, 3-hook crankbaits? Because that's like all no stuff.
Well,
but you were like, it worked.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what are you gonna do? Say we're catching a lot of fish, but we're using 3-hook crankbaits, so that's we've broken a rule. Results are hard to
I get it, but even you guys, like I get people all the time. They're like, "Are you really running lead core?" I'm not in love with anything. I just like what works and makes it easier consistently. Because my thing is, it's just like custom painted lures. You guys and painter guys and everything, they wear me out with this stuff because it's like, oh, I killed them on this today, and then they don't catch them for 5 days on it. I'm like, well, I probably would argue that you could have caught them on chrome blue that day too if you would have had it in the water, right? And so I'm always looking for things that maybe it's not like exceptional crazy one day, but just everything I need to catch them every day. You know what I mean? I want something that works all the time. And even, be honest, so I've got over 60 lead core reels. It's a pain in the butt for all that. And if you're going to do it, and again, today, if let's say we only caught them on 7 colors, you're going to hope you have more than 2, right? Because again, just the amount of time it takes to, go in and out. But even you went and switched some stuff up, right? Like, I'm not going to throw you under the bus here, but a couple of years ago when you did this with me, and we're using Suffix 832, which lead core is not just lead core. So I'm going to give a little quick breakdown of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I have Fisheries stealth core, which is black and red, for stealth. It's a little thicker sheath. It's more of a traditional lead core type, and the lead in that. And I use that in the cold water when I don't want to get as deep. I want that slower fall, just like anybody else when you're fishing. You're putting plastics on or things because you want a slower descent. But the Suffix 832 basically is a gore sheath that is super tiny. It's so much smaller to the fact that I can put 9 colors on those TR200 reels, where if you're using traditional lead core, I think you can barely get 7, 6 or something on that, and it's so much bigger. Hence, we're able to get much deeper, so we don't have to, that regular lead core with 9 colors, you can't get that deep with the other. You just can't, right? You couldn't get to that depth that you need to get to. Yes, there's different things you start clamping stuff on, but I would argue that the whole point of that lead core is, like you said, that snaky, that whole subtle, because once you get into that window, there's so many days where it's just like you are catching them on 7 colors or whatever it is, because that's the window, and those fish maybe aren't going up or down more. But talk to me about how you that trip you did with me where you were like, okay, I'm going to spool up some lead core before I come back here in 2 weeks.
Right, and I was set up, but I get out there and it's like, oh, these fish are 5-6 feet further down, so they've already, they've dropped down. So that first night, I'm out there, 2 more reels, 9 colors, and so we ran 7 and 9. So, it was just the 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks, the difference from when we were out here, when I was out here with you till I came back. This fish had just been pushed down, a little bit deeper, so we needed a little more lead on there. So
we're not going to get into the weeds too much because we literally just did a video on just our lead core rigging. But on that backing that we put out, so go check that video out because this could be a whole podcast on itself. But that backing, the way our little recipe that we have is we let that backing out, and then you can't even put a weight on, and it's going to get you not the same as those other rods, but it gets you close enough that maybe you're catching now and you can do it quickly. Because like today, we didn't have time to do it. You don't have time to re-rig or cutting and doing this. It's like you got to go. And again, efficiency, I think the average thing between maybe some of the guys that you're buddies with or the guy at the ramp that's going, hey man, what were you doing? What color lure? He's probably getting 1 or 2 going when we're getting 4 or 5. Nothing to do with color or anything else other than he's not set up for that. Even like we talked about in the video, having all those extra rod holders. Like I've not got the Burt's rod corral on the front deck, so I have 8 more lead cores I can just grab if something happens or whatever. And then we've got the extra tubes on the side. That's a big deal to have those things not all tangle up and just go time. Efficiency. Isn't that?
Yeah, and the one thing that we have to be careful with is if we're running that lead and we've got divers down and how that line is bellying out and where it's going to go. I would be a little hesitant to be to be weighting that also and then trying to work around those dipsy lines because there's a lot of stuff going on there and trying to keep all that stuff straight in your mind of where all these lines are and so last year I just said, okay, I'll do 9 color because I had all the equipment to do it. I'll just do the 9 colors because I don't want to really have to worry about putting additional weights on there and how it will pull that down close to the boat and like I said,
that's an emergency setup. That's
right.
That's not a system with adding all that weight, right? I would tell you that people that are watching this, I get it that everybody wants the short, simple. You're going to tangle stuff up. You can watch these videos all day long. You watch 10 other people. You have to go do this, and you're going to screw some shit up.
And that's how you're going to learn.
That's how you're going to learn. Yeah. swinging around with the boards, Travis. Bob's feeling really good about this. He was so happy to see that. He was like, Bob, to be honest, you were just happy to not be in the crosshairs. Can we be honest right now?
Well, we can also be honest about 2 fish on lines beside each other.
Well, yeah, but we were going to reel both of them in independently and not have a tangle. But you were a miracle worker with that. We got all that in, whatever. Woo! But literally, when you have those things going out, sometimes it's as simple as having success or having a shit show is 5 to 10 seconds to let that swing around. If you remember last time when we had Pat, we're like, because everybody wants to start reeling, and you got to just let that boat pull that thing around, right?
Yeah, it's got to be, behind the boat as much as you can, or at least, that you can picture in your mind that this line is going to come over the other one and not be problematic. So,
well, I mean, we talked almost, it was, cause there always seems on these videos, unintentionally, there becomes a theme. Because as things are just happening, that I think like, hey, this is kind of what was the difference maker today, or what was, a little different than the other videos or whatever, and just don't try to plan any of that. And I think today, even though we didn't do an amazing job at it at times, it was efficiency. And the thing that I kept telling people, that you guys that watched the day on the lake video that we just did, to me, I think that the average guy, or if I would have been on a guide trip, people would have been flipping out, because when we had 3 or 4 fish on, and I'm like, no reeling, setting. You know what I mean? Like, you guys get it, but even then, it's like everybody's jumping. We're like, no. And that's why we have those releases on the Dipsy and those boards that are pretty taut, because I don't want that to come off. Because we had like fish, if you guys remember this, on both outside boards pulling. Then we got one on one of the other lead core rods, and then we had a diver on. If all of those go at the same time, you have the best worst thing ever, because you're not going to get them all in. You're probably going to have a huge tangle. But we took that time to get all the rods in, because now all of a sudden what happens, which you guys got to realize, is if we start cranking those in, even if we don't have a tangle and everything just works out perfect, we crank all 3 of those in, now we have no rods in the water, right? Would you have done that different? But you can be honest.
Well, a lot of it depends on who I've got in the boat.
Oh, I feel your shots fired.
No, I mean, there's some people you have in the boat that just aren't really, in tune with exactly what's going on, and you're trying to orchestrate that. We've been, we've reeled in a few fish and kind of done some of this stuff before, so we kind of have an idea of where everything is at. But sometimes, it depends on who you've got in there. Some people just, don't understand the whole spread that's going on out there. So, there's cases where I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of that time, because I don't want that person to end up, getting 1 line into 3 lines, and now I've got 3 lines that are screwed up, and maybe it took me a little bit longer to get that another line back in the water. So just taking a little bit of time, to do that, especially out here. I mean, a lot of times, you'll come out, if the fishing's going and you got the right program, you got 3 guys in the boat, your limit's 18, most of these fish are coming from deep, they're not going to be released. So, a lot of times, it's 9:30 and you're done.
I hear what you're saying, but I think it's the point of the thing though is again, people watching this, and again, you could argue this, I'm not saying my way is the way, but tangles aside and everything, there's times where we are going to have no lead core out, and it's going to take forever, and then we're reeling dipsies, and because I've had this, you look down, you have no rods in the water. Mm-hmm. Now how much time that takes, because now you're way behind. So if we just don't reel for a couple minutes and we set 2 of those lead cores, because we have these boards stripped and we can get them to come around, now all of a sudden those are already out. And while you're bringing those lead cores in, it takes 6,000 hours to get in, because we've got 300 feet of line. Now I'm setting or reeling the dipsies underneath. Like, that's how we get the dipsies out. Where you guys are both cranking, I'm setting dipsies around. So I think it's important to understand where your stuff is at, and you're going to ultimately have to find that out by tangling some stuff.
Yeah, and we did have a couple boards that did pull, that did pop off, where the fish hit them hard and they snapped them off. If we would have been...
Not breaking them, just pulling free.
Right, release the boards released.
We're using P-line CXX strong.
So, now those ones are in our corridor. So now if we're trying to let something out and one of those is in that corridor that we want to bring fish in, then that's kind of blocked us. And I've tried some of these things where you think you've got time to get it out, and then next thing you know, the board comes off, and now you're challenged, or you're bringing the inside one, and the next thing the outside one goes off, and pulls the board out there. So in a lot of cases, every situation's a little bit different.
100%.
So
you're only one difference in the equation. It's like I always say, you got to play chess, not checkers.
right.
Because you got to think ahead. That's my whole thing with the stuff. But at any rate, so again, it's not like you're some wreck here. Me and you don't fish together all the time. So did you learn anything or see a different way of doing something today, or be like, yeah, I wouldn't have done that, or that worked out amazing or shitty?
I think for me, and it comes back to some of what you were just saying about who's in the boat and how many of us and how much. So today, how much of it was each of us was doing something always. So we weren't all three trying to land one fish. We weren't, we kind of each picked a job as one became necessary, and we each were doing something different almost all the time to keep it all working.
And I think that's a good point, because again, obviously I'm a boat Nazi, but you have to have, again, if you're fishing with your kids or your buddies, I'm going to tell you, because I do fish with a lot of really good fishermen, and not all the time, obviously I'm running like guide trips, and I'm going to tell you some of the worst shit shows that I've had in the boat are with two other people that are amazing fishermen. But what happens is that's why I said, what did I say this morning? Communicate, boys. You have to communicate when you have a shit show going on, good, bad, or indifferent, or hey, this is what's going on, hey, that's coming in, how far. And I think that when you get guys, I see it again, especially when I'm doing media or something, I have these really good fishermen, and it becomes a terrible situation, because no one is taking that leadership role of like, okay, you need to tell me, or hey, what are you at? It's like a guide trip. It's no different than if you had your kids with you.
To get back to your original question though, in the kind of bite we were on today, if we weren't time limited, so there wasn't this storm coming in, well, we thought 3 hours, but it was actually 2. And
we needed the Sims Pro drive, like 100% zipped up.
But I would have run fewer rods to potentially be more effective than I might have been with more rods if I didn't think I could had the crew or even myself could operate them correctly.
You probably, and we even joked about this, I didn't put the dipsy divers down originally, because so often the lead core stuff is so good that you don't get the dipsies out, because we probably would have only run dipsies, and that's, again, nor here nor there. I think sometimes it's the size of fish, or also where in the water column. Like I like to have both of those tools to kind of determine what's going on. But anything else that you can think of that we saw today, learned today, or difference makers? I know the bite was really good, but here's the deal. There's a lot of people, you got to do all of these steps we just talked about. You can't just do one. Just don't go buy the lead core. Just don't buy a deep junior thunderstick or a silver streak double willow. We had 15 miles, or roughly whatever that was, of not seeing anything. Like, you've got to use this 2D marking to get us in the game, right? And then set up on them. Today we didn't. Things just worked out. But a lot of times it's that speed deal because of the current. Having that fish hawk is a game changer. So many days for me. And even if nothing else, knowing where I'm at, because I'm slower than I think, and so my lead cores are deeper than I think they are, or the other way around. But anything else you could share with these fine people that you feel was a difference maker, or that you were like, God, this ginger captain, he is just an absolute dipshit.
At the most basic level, if we weren't where feeding fish were, we don't catch them. It doesn't matter how well we run our rods. It doesn't matter how good our spread is. You have to use your sonar to find the fish that you're looking for. So not just generic marks. If we just stopped on that bait when we first found it and said, oh man, there's a lot of stuff here, probably wouldn't have done as well.
Hopefully not, because it was too rough that we would have had to pick up, lost time, and then we obviously wouldn't have as much time. But I think one thing that I see, and again, you guys don't read the comments and do this every day like I do with all the stuff we do, all the media. I think people are always trying to fine tune before they get the rough carpentry. You know what I mean? They're like trying to put the countertops in when they still don't have the roof on the house. Well, what color and how many feet back? And they aren't taking the time to have their sonar and all that stuff kind of put together. And I mean, little things like I'm going to just tell you, we had this on a trip with some other people. I'm not going to throw them under the bus, but we were running dipsy divers, and I was like, we were just, zero. Like, we're not catching them. I was like, you got longer leaders? To the point that I ended up just tying some up. We were running 9 and 10 foot leaders on those dipsies. And I'm telling you, if you shorten them up, I'm not saying we wouldn't have caught fish today, but it's crazy many days on how that, goes away. But then the second part of that kind of deal is I got 9 foot handles on those Beckmans. We communicated, you got long rods, it helps a little bit. That makes a big difference because now you got that leader that you need to get all those extra bites, but you don't have a way of getting them in the boat. You use little shorty nets, so it's little things like that. Bob, I feel like you're chomping at the bit to finish this up here with this.
Well, I'm not going to use the
Wisdom from Bob, bring it.
The 9 foot net and stand leaning over the Bigwater.
I'm an aggressive netter, Bob.
I'm at that stage where I'm not as aggressive. I want to stay inside the boat.
I don't know if you're not, because he gets lippy off camera. On camera, he's always like, "Oh, Boris, me." But I feel like he's not as agile, is what it is. He's just not as agile. Now, Bob, when I get to be 85 like you, I probably won't be agile either.
If you get to be 85.
Yeah, that's it. My dad told me midlife crisis was 21, so I'm already ahead of that. You know what I mean? I'm already beat that by a couple of years. But so here's what we're going to kind of finish up with, unless you guys have something you'd like to interject, which you can obviously do.
No, thank you, sir.
The beatings will continue until the morale improves. Yeah. So here's the deal. You guys watching the stuff there and commenting, a lot of times we really get crappy questions, I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, just like, I don't even know how to answer some of the questions that do, but they're like, what should I do to catch more fish?
I'll fish more.
Yeah, I'm fishing in the summer and I need to fish deeper. What do I do? Or what speed do I fish? Like, these are questions we get. So we got some pretty good ones here, and we're all going to take kind of a crack at this. So in layman's terms, kind of broken down a little bit, what happens before you leave the dock? So the question kind of along the line is what type of online research do you about water clarity, winds, temps, forecast that help you determine, where you're going to set up, and basically really not the presentation as much as, but just getting us in the game. Like, how do you end up where we're at in Ohio, I think is kind of the general consensus. So they're not going to like probably some of my answers on this because it's not going to help them out as much, but again.
Well, I think we've talked through some of this. So, big picture, adult walleye are in the central basin. It's summer. We know fish are here because they need to be physiologically. Then everything with today, we have storms coming, so we have to go out early. We've looked at the hypoxia predictor. We know we probably have to go farther than just a short trip out and catch them near shore. And then it's, the radar, and we waited till it got a little bit light to look at the waves and see what it looked like. There were a lot of steps that led up to us going out when and where we went out.
I think it's just like if you're a hunter, right? Like, everybody's doing the same thing, but the more you do it, then you just take some of these little things for granted. And I think some of these people are like, even the wind apps and different things, even though they're so inaccurate at times. Today is kind of a good example, but at the same point, they kind of get you in the game. Like, we weren't supposed to get 70 to 80 mile an hour winds today, but yet here we are. We just hit that perfect cell or whatever, or imperfect cell, however you want to look at it. But I think the big thing is there's so many resources out there if you're not lazy. Even some of these Facebook groups and things, and just seeing the trends. Because I think if you're the guy that's like, hey, I'm going to go deer hunting tomorrow. Where do I go deer hunting? You're not going to be successful as the guy that's following things, or let alone the guy that's doing food plots or hunting with buddies or taking them fishing in the summer so he has a hunting spot to go to. You know what I mean by that? It's like, if you follow along on some of these things and kind of follow those trends, you even start seeing, hey, if you're going to come down here and you want to fish in August because you got time off work, see where these fish are in July and kind of seeing where some of those migrations are, because it really is different from year to year.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some, Facebook sites that are talking about, what lines they're at, so you kind of have a starting point of, where some of the people are fishing. But the thing that, you'll get totally blown away is that, taking it, to the 0-0 line or the 0-1 or whatever like that, these schools of fish are massive. I mean, miles and miles of fish, and so a lot of it has to say, maybe they're in this general area, but Now you got to put your tools to work. You got to depend on that sonar. You got to see where where the bait is, see where the where the fish are in relation to that, and look at where they're at on the water column. And then start the process. Am I going to run dipsies? I'm going to run lead car. I'm going to run wire.
Let's not get into presentation. Like this question is more not getting into that, but I think like the thing is honestly we put a ton of this out here. Like you said, the apps, the different things that are all public. I mean, even the like Vandergoot there with some of that tracking stuff. That is like a huge resource to kind of see. Again, it's not real time. You're basically a year behind. But the news flash is sometimes there's more fish east of Kelly's and then next year there's not. But seeing these trends when you start looking at 5 to 10 years, all of a sudden you're starting to see these kind of generalized patterns that help clue you in. And yeah, maybe you're going to stub your toe one day, but it helps give you a little bit easier way to course correct. So the next question is basically kind of similar, but I made it 2 different ones because it's 2 different people, but I think this one's a little more presentation focused, and I think the answers by me are going to be different anyhow. But basically, how are you breaking down the water? Are you looking at maps before fishing? The process when you're on the water. So more of like, okay, we're stuck here or we're going out of port X or whatever. How are we breaking that down?
What are we talking about? In the here where we're at today, or just in general?
Bob didn't listen to the question. God, you would fail. I'm screwing us about. So breaking down the water, like you said, the maps. I know he's just rolling his eyes because he doesn't listen. If he just would put his gumption in there.
I was just looking for some clarification. So
it's right next to the ice from this morning. So inside joke. So maps. He's like, again, before we go fishing, like the night before. I'm just throwing that in there. He didn't say it, but he said looking at maps before fishing is an example, or process on the water. Honestly, I'm going to do something probably different than you guys are doing. I'm not going to lie to you. I called a couple buddies. And I said, hey, I don't need wave points. Because I'm smart enough to know that wave points don't matter. When I'm guiding 4 or 5 days in a row and it doesn't change. And the good guys don't even get me in the game. Because when you start living and dying by wave points on fish that are roaming, chasing smelt, or the oxygen levels changing, or the current changing, you almost don't. I don't even want that to clutter my head. I want to get in that vicinity. So I do look at maps. I have 2 paper maps here with me on the trip because again, as I start looking at these things and waypoints and things, or any of that stuff from the past, and I'm just kind of like, okay, wait a minute. Here's, it helps for me give a better visualization. Even though I've got nice big 12-inch Humminbird units, you can only see so much on that. When you start zooming in and zooming out, you lose some of that. So I still use paper maps. I have them with. I looked at last night at them.
One thing I've done a lot, and especially down here, somewhere I don't fish as often, somewhere that I'm not quite as familiar with, and might mean in the long runs. Navionics has a chart viewer on their website. You go to Navionics website, absolutely free. Click on chart viewer, and you see the depth contours that you would see on your GPS, and it has a measurement tool. I start measuring. Well, it's a 10-mile trip out to 68 feet of water. Maybe it's more 15 miles out to 72. I just start getting a feel for, okay, what kind of trip am I looking at to get to where I think I need to be, and does the weather let me? Is my boat right for that trip? What do I need to think about?
I have Lake Master, the new chip, and it is insane with that color stuff and to so quickly, even from the back of the boat, see when we're coming up on a break or know that we're getting to that deeper water. Because again, as you go up and down this lake, that angle changes. Like this lake's, people think of it as going east and west, but it really angles up quite a bit northeast as it kind of goes to the east. But so breaking down the water, I think that for me the number one thing is to not fish memories. And avoid that, and again, it's tough sometimes, but I trust my 2D sonar so much, especially in this deep water, that for me, I'll drive around for 2 hours and not put a line in the water because I know that once I am fishing, I'm going to catch them. And I think that's easy to say right now. I think that's very difficult for people that aren't experienced or maybe watching this that don't have that trust. Maybe their stuff's not set up right. Maybe that transducer is not in the right location. That's a big problem. But once you're on the water, for me, it's the sonar deal. Now, if we're fishing in 20 feet of water or less, I don't trust that nearly as much. I don't almost even look at it because of all the stuff we talked about earlier in the podcast.
It comes down to what are you using it for. Maybe you're looking for a bottom hardness or a 1 foot break that's pretty quick. You know, you're not looking for fish in that case. You're looking for specific habitat.
Walleyes are really good at getting out of the way of a transducer. They do not like the boat. Bait fish don't seem to care. And a guy taught me really one of my simple little things that I learned a long time ago is fish don't go far from the grocery store. So if you see enough bait for a while, at some point there's going to be what you're looking for close to it. But anything else on breaking down water that you feel like we need to go after?
Modus, watercolor, you know, there are resources. You can look at recent satellite shots. We just had a heck of a blow. I'm going to be really curious tomorrow to see what the lake looks like if we get a good satellite shot.
And I would say right now, if we're talking here and now, that matters the least throughout the season. In the spring and the fall, I live and die by that thing. When we have like cloud for 3 days, I'm like, no! Because I can almost look at that and know where, if maybe even not where I'm going, but I know where I'm not going. Mm-hmm. Because the water's either too clean or too dirty, and then temperatures and all that stuff. In the summertime, especially out here, it probably doesn't affect us as much. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, but if you're going perch fishing in the Western Basin this weekend, you sure as heck will want to know what that watercolor looks like.
Okay. Yeah, this one's geared right in your wheelhouse. You know, I always say, I'm not a biologist, but well, we have one here now. Can you successfully, and again, maybe expand upon this direct question, but in the generalized thing, can you successfully release fish deeper than 30 feet of water?
So that was a good discussion on the boat today. You know, it's not the depth of water you're in, it's the depth of water that the walleye is coming up from when you catch it. And they've identified, 30 feet is that tipping point. If you're catching them from less than 30 feet in the water column, you can reasonably release them. If it's more than 30, you likely can't. And what we talked about today on the boat is water temperature plays a big role in that. So, there are certainly fizzing techniques. I've always been shy about suggesting people fizz because...
It's like them giving me an IV.
Right. Well, and with each species, the right location is different, and there is a little bit of finesse and just kind of knowing how to do it. If you've never fizzed a fish, I wouldn't grab a needle and run around and start poking fish. Do a little research, find some resources to...
We can't practice on Bob either, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
He's got some big veins.
That's between you and Bob. But,
yeah.
So it comes down to a couple of things. How deep did you catch the fish? If that was more than 30 feet and the water temperature is warm, we're in the mid to upper 70s today. Walleye don't handle temperature stress well, and if you catch them deeper than 30 feet, they're going to have what we call barotrauma issues where they decompress. That swim bladder comes out, and quite frankly, it's not going to live. So you have to choose where you're running lures and how many fish you have in the live well, and think about what you're doing. It was in the forefront of our discussions all morning.
Well, and my boat is set up totally different this time of year. I don't generally like to keep big fish, and again, I like to do catch and release with clients. I don't want to drag them off when we have a fire bite like we did. This time of year, it is what it is, and that's why we've got the Lakewood live well bag in the rear, in the live well, pumping nonstop. Just run, it's not even on high, it's just running nonstop. Then we also had a cooler loaded up with another Lakewood live well bag, so we just boom, boom, pick them up, switch them back and forth or whatever. And that was loaded up with ice, so we can get those fish that are definitely going to be kept, or especially the ones that we aren't even trying to take a picture, or again, maybe different for you guys, but having multiple sources there, or maybe we have one we're going to see if we're going to try to release it or whatever. But to me, my experience is just from doing it. If you have the depth and the temperature, it's like game over.
Yep.
It's maybe if you have one or the other, but I think I'd be interested to hear your opinion on this. So the way I typically like to fish is spinners with inline weights, and not necessarily down here, kind of like Bob talking back in the day, but even back our way, when we're in 40 feet, we got 40 feet of water at Kelly's Island.
Yeah.
And when I'm fishing spinners at, let's say, don't hold me direct, but let's say a mile an hour, even in the warm water, I feel like I can release a lot more of those fish. Now again, when that temp starts going up, it's like, ugh. But when I'm fishing slower and I'm not rocketing those fish to the surface, and you're playing them up and down, and it seems like a lot of those fish are releasable. Now,
that's a completely different story than out here, right? We're going 2 miles per hour. We're reeling them faster. They're coming up quicker, and exactly what you said. You're going slow. You're fighting them differently. you know, maybe you're catching bigger fish and you're intentionally fighting them slower to not lose them. Yeah, it's common sense, right? If the water's cooler, if they've been fought more carefully, and you know, then it's what do they look like? Do I see the air bladder? You know, did it come out?
I think we shot a camera shot of that. It literally was. And again, we're bringing them on the lead core. It took 20 minutes to get the thing in because it's 9,000 miles out. Like, we couldn't have done anything different with that. That was just a casualty of war. But so the last part of this question I'm going to answer, and then you give me a report card on how I did from your knowledge with this. So it's like, how do you release fish best? And I would tell you this. It's like, as a guide, we handle a tremendous amount of fish. And I would say that the big thing is when people just throw fish over the side, I'm not saying even how we do this yet. But they're like, oh yeah, it swam away. I got news for you. That doesn't mean that fish is living. So don't drag the thing on the carpet. I'm seeing a lot of pictures of these dudes covering their floor of their boat full of fish. And they're like, yeah, release them all. You're a jackass. Okay? You take the protective slime coat off. Again, I'm going to let the biologist get in this. But it's how you handle that fish. So when I have a guy in there, I just look at him and I was like, you know me, I'm blowing as all get up. I have those little Fish USA fish grippers. And when I see a guy's like, I don't want to... you put the fish gripper in. Boom. Now we're not in the gills. You know what I mean? The guys, when you take a picture and they instantly just want to, like, it's like, isn't there like a cartoon about that? Like the death, there's like the glove or something. Like that fish is not releasable now. And they're like, oh, they throw it over real quick. Well, you're making yourself feel better. And then another one that we get all the time, because I kind of like, I'll hold them a few feet above the water and I basically put them head first in. Because I've seen when you just do the whole, like, you know, the stories, fly fishing little, and you hold them at water level, so, you know, especially when the boat's going forward, they need a little shot, because they'll sit there, and you can touch them with a net handle. The gills are great, they're amazing. Bob does not like that answer. If you guys are watching the video, he's got a small bladder, it's no problem. But, so... long story short, and I get a lot of hate, so again, give me a second, but then give me your answer on that, where I let these things go from a couple feet up, but head first, because when I've done the whole, just hold them in there, they lay there and seagulls will come peck on them, and then you got to go over and they chase them around, and then they're perfectly fine still, because again, in 40-degree water, 45-degree water, they kind of get shocked up. I'll even put weights on. I've got some really heavy weights that I'll put in the live well there underneath it to let them right themselves, so I'll give them plenty of space in the live well, so that they have that. And so it's like all these little steps on how you handle it. I don't think it's just one thing, or if you toss it in the lake right now, miraculously that fish is going to live, but it's that whole process.
I think it's handling them responsibly, so having your hands wet if you're touching the fish and holding it, having it in the boat a minute and a half instead of 7 minutes.
If you're taking pictures, it can't be 9 minutes.
Right, exactly. But then I think it's important to get them started down, because like you were just saying, with the boat moving, you know, if you lose a grip and they just flop out of your hand and they don't right themselves, then there's an orientation issue where they're not getting righted to get started back down, and then other stuff kicks in, like birds or other stress. But
the picture one's a big one, because I'll get guys and there's 6 cell phones that come in. It's like, I get it, guys, but we can like literally text or email these to you. We all got the same type of phones. And you get these guys and they want to hold them up, and I'm like, and so I'll tell them sometimes, especially when I get really nice fish, I'm like, guys, I understand you want to document the shit out of this, so this fish is going home with us, because it's not going to be quality released. And it's like, that's okay, we can have one fish to do that, or especially if it's some we just had one young lady's her biggest fish ever, she's been fishing with her dad, this all into the deal. I think that's okay sometimes, especially where we live, but it's like, the worst part is you do that 25 times. It's like, we're going to make our sacrificial deal, then I'm going to take some quick pics, I'm going to send them to you. Surprisingly, 99% of the people don't have a problem with that when you say that's just what we're doing.
Well, I will say, with cool water, as long as we're not talking 78 like we have today, put them in the live well. Get ready to take the pictures, get the net, get the rods out of the way, get some water on your hands. Put them in the live well, let them recover while you get ready. Then it's a pick them up out of the live well, take a few pictures, right back in the water.
It's hilarious that you say that, because producer dude and boss lady, as they look at some of these comments and things we come across, the people are like, a bunch, we get these troll comments, mainly from jackasses, delete block. They're like, yeah, I bet you released that. First thing you do is put it in the live well. absolutely. We in my boat we do not take pictures as that fish is caught.
Mm-hmm.
We put them in because we just fought that thing. It's like me holding it. We swam a marathon, and now you want to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
So we put those things. We put them in the live well, let them and see how their condition is, and see if they need a little nurturing. I use that. I think was it oxygenator O2 or something that helps like clot blood and things like that in the live well. That's a big one. It also takes like the ammonia out if you got that scum and all that stuff like we did have today, even though it was the death pool. But is there any other keys with the fish handling that we can do to do better?
Less handling is better, and be realistic. Look at the fish. If it's in tough shape, it's not going to survive. It's not going to release well. If it's in good shape, you have that option.
Oh, I got one more, and I know you're going to back me. I'm gonna set you up on this one. I literally had a guy send me. He told me I was an asshole for the way that I was, lowering him into the water or torpedo him down, let him go head first. And he sent me a video. This is how you do it. And you can't even make this stuff up because you're a fucking clown. This guy was trolling forward, and he had the fish backwards, and he had the water going against their gills. Do you want to explain? Do you want to give the biology? This is not me. This is the fishing guy. Don't know what's going on. What does the biologist, the head of fisheries, have to say about a fish water backwards on the gills?
Yeah, I mean, water's got to pass over their gills, but it's not going to be effective if their mouth is clamped shut.
No, backwards. It was going gills. It was going backwards.
Yeah. At the end of the day, as little stress on the fish as possible, and I would much rather do what you do compared to like holding their tail and like trying to get them going.
But if you do, you want the head facing the direction of the troll. You don't want to have them backwards because you literally drown them, basically. So
more stress.
There you go now. Okay, moving on.
Stress, there's always stress.
There's a lot of stress here with Bob. We kind of talked about this earlier, but this was a good question, so we're going to talk a little bit about this. Comparison between single strand wire versus lead core, rigging and how to fish it. So I'm going to tell you, just go watch our lead core rigging video because we literally just put one out on that. So we're not going to go into that again and again. But let's talk about, Bob, why don't you give us the quick version on single strand wire setup, because me and you did this last year.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, I don't know if you know numbers and things, but VMC number 12 barrel swivel. Do not go bigger, or it probably is not going to go through your line guide.
Got to be small. Definitely has to be small, because and that's what you're using to attach, the wire to the leader or wire to the backing. You're going to have, start off with that, 30 to 50 feet of mono, then put a whatever wire, it's really, anywhere from 300 to 350 feet of wire. If you're planning on putting a board on it, then you're going to want to have mono, after that, and then we use backing. The rest of the backing would be braid.
We're gonna start from the beginning to see if it's different. So on mine, we've got a little bit of mono because we're gonna cover the spool just a little bit. Then I'm gonna put some braid on there, and the reason for that is that stuff's going to be out in the sun. I don't use these all the time. I don't want to replace it. The mono is going to break down. So I've got some like P-line, like Endurex braids, no braid. So I run quite a bit of that on there. And then I'm going to put a 50-foot section that we're just going to back-to-back uni with mono. And that way we know, because I'm using TR200s, you don't need a fancy line counter reel. So I'm going to have a 50-foot section so we know that that's essentially going to give us, because people will say plus backing. A lot of these guys that run wire a lot, they say plus backing. It's that roughly 50-foot section, right? We're going to use that VMC number 12 swivel on there so we can tie to one side, and then we're going to do, there's several ways to do it, but a haywire twist is a really good one. Don't make it short and just keep wrapping it down, because once you cut and try to cut that wire, you're going to always have that sharp spot, and that's going to dig into other things, so you want to work that down, and or piece of heat shrink. Me and you like small heat shrink, because that'll basically just create not a wear point. Then we're going to put our single strand wire on. Clicker never comes off. Tension on that thing, and again, like you said, 250 to 350 depends who you are. 12-pound single strand wire is kind of the magic potion most guys would tell you here. And then we're going to do another haywire twist, right, with the number 12 barrel swivel, and that way we can tie that leader on and change it super quick, super easy if things get messed up or junked up. And we had one today. We just got onto some braid, so we changed that really quick, but Then you're putting a snapper or whatever you want to do on the back end of that. It varies, I think, a lot with the leader length. I like a little more because, again, I just don't have to cut and do that. And I think getting away from that at times can matter. But a lot of guys use 7 feet. I'll use as much as 30. That's just what I do. But what
I've even used, up to 50. I don't know that there's a magic number. I mean, most of the magic is happening with the length of the wire. Whether the 300 or 350. I mean, that's really the where you determine. And the fish are telling you which is working better, the 300 or
magic
350.
always happens when bows in my boat.
Of course. That's just the way I am.
Any rate, so watch the lead core. We literally have a whole breakdown on that. It is a little different, but not a lot. I would tell you another really good trick with the wire is the single strand wire stuff is kind of soft, but you don't need a fancy rod. Use a planer board type rod. But whatever rod you put that on, don't plan on using that for something else because you will get a little grooving on that unless you want to spend a whole lot of money on a rod with guides that you really don't need to. So just that is a dedicated rod for that because that grooving will, if you start running mono or something else in there, can mess with that because it will get a little wear over time.
Yeah, and I think one of the bigger things is that leader that you have on there, most of your real heavy fishing, the fighting is going to be in that last 50 to in that last 50 feet. So if what you've got in that rod is all mono, then there's going to be less abrasion on those guides. So if you've run a short leader,
Bob, you are just knocking the lights out of here.
If you're running a short leader that's less than the length of the rod, now you've got that wire on those guides, so that's going to be a real wear factor. So that's one of the things that I always keep in mind is that I want to make sure that last 50 feet, especially if that's a fish that's really pumping, that I'm running that line that's on the rod is mono.
And that's a good point because a lot of everybody's fluorocarbon crazy, and I do run a lot of fluorocarbon, but most of my leaders are 12-pound CXX strong P-line, which is really strong stuff. It's that moss green color, and I don't have to change it as much as what I like. But again, to your point, so many of these fish are lost close to the boat. That extra shock absorber, it's like a giant snubber. That matters. That's a lot of extra fish in my boat at the end of the year. I just use, what do you do? Are you using mono fluorocarbon for
mono?
Those? Okay, there we go. So that's pretty well answered. This one, I don't know how, this is kind of broad, but we're gonna touch this down a little bit. We're gonna let you jump on this one, Travis. The breakdown of central and eastern basin fishing. This is a little broad. This is kind of not a great example of a perfect question here, but I mean, besides basically just deeper, you have to be able to fish deeper. So anything else you'd like to throw in on that?
The similarities are they're mostly eating smelt. You're looking for the same types of things on your sonar, but with the linology, the difference is you have oxygen on the bottom in the East Basin. So you have that thermocline, you have that same setup, but the East Basin is less productive. That oxygen in the lower water mass doesn't get used up. And we've seen on tags that walleye will be on the bottom in 150 to 200 feet of water. So
yeah, Chris Vandergoot podcast, he got in deep detail on this with the acoustic telemetry as like serious evidence, not guessing.
So I think the East Basin, you have a wider playing field to cover depth-wise, potentially. But there are a lot of similarities. Clear water, deep fish, getting baits down to where your sonar says you need to.
This last one, I kind of saved it as a somewhat joke, but
It's not the last one. We do have one more.
oh wait, Boss Lady says we have one more. Second to last is just because again we go through all this stuff and someone's like, well, I'm only gonna buy one color crankbait. What is it? And I'm like, oh. But yes. Favorite stick bait to pull on divers. I've got one. You guys already know my number one, and it's been my number one not because I work with the company. Decades before I worked with them, you know my number one. You probably don't know my number two though. Which?
Renoskis, shallow Renoskis.
Yep.
Love them on lead core, love them behind divers. They're great baits, and believe it or not, I'm going a lot larger than we were today, but size 14 shallow Huskies.
See, 10s and 12s, I know you said 14s today, 10s and 12s is I think I get more bites, but you're right, those Huskies are people, and I'm one of them, I preach a little bit that they're great in cold water. That's a sleeper bait. Like last year when we were down here, we caught them really good on a diver.
It's getting away from divers, but on the lead core, I've had some incredible days with size 14 shallow Huskies.
Yeah, nice. Bob?
Well, I think
Would you like a repeat of the question?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not stooping to that level to respond with that.
Fish camp shenanigan. Honestly, I'm getting some looks from behind the camera here. I can't believe we've been this good. I don't even have an adult beverage. This is kind of ridiculous. This has been way too serious because I've got serious 1 and serious 2 over here, and I just want to throw poop on the wall.
You set this up.
I did. You're supposed to balance out my zen or some shit. I don't know. Anyhow,
if we're talking about pulling off a dipsies,
Bob, we're talking about what is your favorite stick bait to pull on divers. I'll repeat the question one more time.
Well, Travis was talking about pulling.
He got off topic. Don't get off topic like him.
I expanded upon the question. I answered the question.
You can't handle the truth.
If we're fishing divers back to the west, I'll always, pull out like a J7 or J9, just to see how those baits react. Sometimes those jointed.
Rapala jointed is what he's talking about.
And sometimes it's a lot of times it's it's the J7s. You throw on a J9 and not get a bite, but sticking with the J7s, little smaller baits, that's always one that I'm going to put out and at least give that a try just to see how they were going to respond to those.
Okay, that's your go-to. Okay. I'll give you one more, Bob. One of the next thing.
It's actually the same question. I think that guy was pretty persistent and asked it on both platforms.
Yeah. So at any rate, my sleeper one is a J7. And I'm here to tell you that I think it's almost like the spoon thing. When you use a small spoon like the Silver Streak Junior, 9 out of 10 times you're going to catch more fish on that. The only time you don't is when there's so much little fish or shorts that you can't keep them in the water, because you're getting bit by junk or whatever, then you go to a bigger spoon. I have never really consistently done well on the bigger ones. I've got a bunch of them, like 9s and things like that, and 11s. But the J7, there's something magical about that.
And we share that concept?
We do. However, that's not my number one.
Oh.
Because then we can't share that moment. It's the Storm Thunderstick, because that just catches them. When we're into the fall, that still rocks them. Now I'll generally go to the bigger one then, the full size with 3 hooks, but shallow lip. Well, right now the Junior is we've been using that for several months. Just lights out. You guys watched some of the videos with Captain Chris recently, and that was just absolutely fire. So Storm Thunderstick, no doubt. There's a lot of things working.
Especially the ones that are hard to get right now.
Yeah. We might have some. Yeah, there's all these colors and things, and they quit making this stuff and all that good stuff. But do we have anything else?
That was it.
That was it. I'm so happy to be done. I'm going to get an adult beverage. But I thank you guys for, not fishing with me today because that was a dumpster fire, but taking the time to go through the podcast. Bob, is there anything you'd like to leave these people with? This is your opportunity to say anything you want. It just has to be brief because we're charging by the word.
No, I think that we've said more than enough for tonight.
Normally I would cut them off right now.
Okay.
Travis?
I don't know that we fully summarized this day. from
Yes.
rough water, followed by torrential rains, a little more electricity than we would like, and a long ride back in,
Trees falling over.
followed by trees getting ripped out of the ground with 70-mile-per-hour winds,
Fish camp, amazing dinner.
and an amazing dinner.
And that's why we have had the continued power problems while we've been filming, because the wind is still howling.
It's been a special day.
Mm. Do we need to summarize anything else from the day on the water that you don't think we did a good job of?
They didn't kill you.
Honestly, these guys, they did really good. Bob normally doesn't like to communicate. Bob likes to do what he does because he's his captain. So when he's with me, Tennille, he's my captain. But, honestly, we worked pretty well together today.
I think we're starting to understand what you're thinking. It's not always easy getting inside that head.
I mean,
nobody really wants to go there.
It's a dumpster fire. Yeah, we had 2 hours to try to put it out.
Sometimes, you just need to sit back and watch the show. We appreciate you watching this show. Make sure you like and subscribe. So the only thing I'm going to tell you guys that made it all the way to the end here, it does help us tremendously if you actually subscribe and like and comment because of those algorithm things. So we can continue to bring these videos like this and even more frequently because the one thing we do here is like, can we get more videos? And it's like, guys, this takes a lot of time and money. It takes away from the day job. We're not making money doing this. So if you could help us a little bit, we will make sure we get even more videos to you. So make sure you look at Instagram, Facebook, YouTube especially. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Make sure you watch our social media too because we've been doing giveaways, all kinds of different stuff. We got our swag bag, Bigwater shirt. Bob's getting brownie points only time ever right there. Bigwater swag. Anything else that we need to inform these people? Boss lady, what do we got?
They got to go back and watch the video from today because that will launch prior to this podcast. So if they miss this, they've got to go back and watch this video.
You guys better be watching this stuff, period, because you guys ask questions like, just watch the video. Guy just asked about how to rig lead core. We have a video from last week called How to Rig Lead Core. So, with that, we are out until the next episode.